evaluation from Liz. Simply fill out the course evaluation and we will send you your CEUs. Our speaker today, I'm going to let him introduce himself, but I first met Gil in person at the National Energy Codes Conference. He was nice enough to help me conduct a conversation about the existing buildings chapter in the Energy Code, which he and I both view as somewhat problematic. And I really like Gil's approach to things because he comes from a reality point of view, not a, well, this is what the code book says point of view. So I really think you'll enjoy his presentation this morning. And again, next Thursday and the following Thursday, he will be coming back. So if you enjoyed this morning, make sure and join us the next 2 Thursdays. Gil, with that, tell us a little bit about yourself and get us started.
Sounds good. Morning, everybody. So this is me. Gil Rossmiller, currently work for Colorado Code Consulting full-time. Started my construction career, a couple of years ago, 1975, so it's been a while. Served on the IRC Plumbing and Mechanical Code Development Committee, and that would have been for the 9 and the 12. The Commercial Energy Code Development Committee for the 15 and the 18, and then just recently served on Residential Energy Code Development Committee for the 21. We've just gotten through all the appeals and everything, so we'll be able to put some programs together and see what's coming in the 21. Then I did about a 13-year stint there as the building official for Parker, Parker, Colorado. Currently live in Minnesota, and it's warmed up here now. It's now close to 30 degrees, so we're really cruising to a nice warm day here in Minnesota. So that's me. Most of the time, pretty laid back here today. Those of you that have heard me before or not, just type in your questions. We'll try to get those toward the end. If anything's pertinent, Jason will pipe in the middle of it, which is perfectly fine. At the end of this, I'll have my email. And like Jason, anytime you've got a question about whatever, more than happy to give you my 10 cents worth. I'm not an AHJ anymore. I don't have the authority of anybody anywhere. I'm not the boss of anybody. Gosh darn it. But I can certainly give you a benefit of my expertise and my experience and to say what I would do in that situation, right? You may accept it. You may whole residential HVAC design process. So Manual J is all about heat gain and heat loss calculations. I don't care how you're heating or cooling your place. It all starts with this Manual J, which is what we'll be talking about today. So it's simply heat gain and heat loss. How big a furnace or heater do I need? Or how big of an air conditioner do I need? That is the next step, Manual S. Manual S, which we'll be doing next week, is all about, now that I know what the heat gain and heat loss is, how do I match my equipment properly so that the equipment I'm picking has the capacity to do what it is I need it to do? Pretty simple. I'll spoil you. So Manual S, there is no software that does Manual S. So if you don't learn anything in the next few weeks, remember that and keep that in the back of your mind. And then we'll move on to Manual D, which is duct design. So if the particular system that you're putting in requires duct work, this is the method that you use. The idea is that this is how it's done. You got to do J, S, and D. There's no other way to do it. This is the process. You don't start with D and go backwards. You start with J, go to S, and then to duct design. Manual D will do in week number 3 to do that. And so today's hour or so that we'll talk about is more of a kind of a high-level overview as if you were a plans examiner, okay? And I actually got a Manual J in my hand, and I need to decide, did they actually do it correctly or not? We're not going to get down too nitty-gritty in the details, but we'll show you what you should be looking for, what are some of the high spots, and what some of these things might mean, and what you should be looking for. All right, so so let's do a little thing here about why we're designing. Okay, we got all kinds of stuff here that we're talking about. You know, anything oversized is just horrible. I think you've probably had several conversations about that. On undersizing, I don't know that we have an issue with undersizing, but it isn't going to work. Okay. Oversizing is the worst thing you can possibly do, especially down in your area. The example I'll be giving today is a design we did in a municipality in Colorado. But down there in Texas and wherever you're listening from, there's plenty of places that are very, very humid. And you really, really need to be careful of that, because if you oversize your equipment, you're not going to get the humidity control that you need, that latent capacity. Okay, we'll talk about that in Manual S, so we don't misunderstand what all that means. And then equipment that's sized properly certainly operates more efficiently and economically. Absolutely, positively. I don't think there's a question about that. And probably the biggest thing here is this whole due diligence piece in a court. Okay, so imagine you're the HVAC guy and you get sucked into court here, and your honor says, well, how did you design this place? And the answer is, well, because we've always done it this way. Oh, okay. Or would you rather say, actually, we followed the code requirements and ACCA requirements and did a complete heat gain and heat loss calculation based on the Manual J process. That took into account, of course, the insulation and all the thermal envelope attributes and the direction of the home that was placed. And then once we had a very accurate heat gain and heat loss, we knew that we could do the Manual S. Now the Manual S then does the capacities of the equipment that we are using to make sure it has obviously the capacity to do the loads that we've now calculated. And because it was a forced air type system, we had duct work. So now that we knew the capacity of the equipment work, now we design the duct work based on Manual D to make certain that the room-to-room flows, the amount of air, CFM, that it needed in room to meet that heat loss or gain was adequate. So the friction rates were good, friction losses were good, and felt that we did a decent design. So if you're the judge in that, who would you rather listen to? Yeah, well, how about this? I don't know why that showed up. That was supposed to be a surprise. This is how it's done, really. Yes? Yeah, you have this little cardboard cutout and you stand across the street until you get to the back, right? Yeah, no, it's not what you do. Here, just a couple other things. And the first thing that folks run into, especially when I started first doing this back in 04 and 05, it was half the size of what they thought it should be. And there were all kinds of Mickey Mouse things that guys were trying to do to get around that. Certainly operating costs, and it's required by code. So there's that funny little slide. So what we'll do here is, this is RightSoft. This is actually the software I have and use. And we'll try to do that in Elite. Now, I don't know if you've seen much of any, but that's what I see most of, is RightSoft or Elite. And those are just the softwares, Manual J softwares, okay? So number one, piece of cake. Got to make sure it's where you're at. This one happens to be in Denver. So if you're in Gillette, Wyoming, or Houston, Texas, that's where you need to be. All of that information is within the software database. So once I tip in Denver, boom, up comes the elevation and up comes the latitude. Right? That all comes in. You can't, they could try to monkey with that, but there's really no need to. Here's just a quick screenshot of what it would look in Elite software. Reference city, Denver, piece of cake. So far, so good, right? Easy. Then we're looking for orientation and the elevation of where we're at, okay? For those of us that are dealing with production type homes, okay, we have what we call a rotational report that we can look at and see where the highest load is, okay? And generally speaking, now there's a place in RightSoft, I'm sure with Elite, that you can click on a compass like piece, and it just flips the house the worst possible way, basically based on the solar gains. And we'll take a look at that here in a second. And we're dealing with a custom type home. It's pretty easy, right? It's like we know which way they're facing, right? We know which way the front door is facing, and it's always based off the front door. Where it's going to be production homes, they have no clue which way the front door is going to face. You ask them which way the front door is going to face, and they're going to say, toward the street? Yeah, right. So that's why doing that to the highest load is the best. And we'll, when we get into Manual S, we'll decide, as a teaser for next week, how do you know when a production home might need 2 different equipment sizes? Yes, that's very good. So here, elevation, this just came through, you know, it's mile high, but depending on where you're at, you can adjust that if you wish. Again here, this is the orientational report then that you see out of RightSoft. You can see in this particular case, the highest load is when the front door faces south. So if this was a production home, this is what we would use in this particular case. And next week, I'll tell you why we won't have to have 2 systems on this particular house. This one here, this is not the same house, just to let you know, if I didn't say that before. This is 2 completely different houses. They just happen to both be in Denver. So we've got an elevation there. It's a little bit higher, but you know what? A few hundred feet here and there isn't going to make a difference. I don't know that you guys deal a lot with altitude in Texas, if you got places that, but in places in Colorado, when you know you're starting at about 5,000 feet and you're going up to about 14. You know, you got places that are 10, 12,000 feet. It's a big deal. Okay? It's a huge deal, especially when it comes to equipment performance. Yet another teaser for next week.
I used to live in Beaver Creek, Colorado. Yeah, it makes a big difference, that elevation, no doubt. In Texas, West Texas, we have a little bit of elevation, but that's about it.
So you got any places that are over 2,000 feet?
Far West Texas, but that's about it. And not much.
Yeah, so the most part, you guys will just learn how to do that next week, because I think it's important. It's unique to these areas. Most places, if you're less than 2,000 square feet over sea level, you really don't have to worry about many adjustments. Anything less than 2,000 feet, all the equipment manufacturer says you're good to go. Here's just a rotational report here from Elite. Again, just showing what the sensible gain is. In this particular case, it happened to be southeast. A little over 17,600 BTU for sensible gain. And you'll notice the latent gain there. Huh? It's all minus. Yeah, we'll explain to you how that works and why. No latent loads in dry climates. Calculated latent loads. Let me rephrase that. This whole outside design dry bulb temperatures are correct, and jurisdictions now might have amended it. Now there is table 1A or 10A in Manual J. Okay. Now you have to understand that Manual J, the last time they printed version 2, I think was 2006. I'd have to look at the book, but it's been a while. And weather data is pretty much updated every decade or so easy. And RightSoft's going to have, and Elite will have the most up-to-date, and jurisdictions might set their own. Many times they do, especially winter design, especially in Colorado and cold climates, they'll set their own. But that also do with summer dry bulb too. Oh yeah, the old sling psychrometer. You ever seen one of these bad boys? Well, I like to put this out because with this, this really kind of explains very simply what this whole distance between this whole wet bulb and dry bulb thing is, okay? So this is an instrument now that they've got ones that do electronic. This is an old timer type stuff. This is fun stuff. So yeah, I don't know why it's doing that. It must have some sort of automatic thing in there. All right, so So what we have is this thing, and it's got two regular old thermometers. So that's just a regular old, let me get a little pointer here. Laser. That's just a regular old thermometer, dry bulb. Okay, then we have another one here, and it's got a little cotton sock on it. Okay, well, what happens here is that we get this thing wet, and then we take this little handle and we start to sling it, start to spin it in a circle. And so now we have a dry bulb temperature and a wet bulb temperature. That is the difference. And so what's happening when you spin this bad boy, if I were spinning this in Colorado, this thing is drying out. Yeah? Wet goes to dry? Yes. And when things dry out, they get colder. It's physics, guys. We can't change it. Okay? So what we can do now is that if I know two pieces, if I know something about the air, two things about the air, wet bulb and dry bulb, I can tell you lots of different things, but I can also tell you what the relative humidity is in the room. Okay? And so, what happened? Don't I have my little, little things in there? Well, evidently I've not got the slides I want. Anyway, oopsie, you can have a little chart, and it's called the depression. So the difference between the wet bulb and the dry bulb, the temperature difference between the two is called the depression. Then you get a little chart that you can look at that then will tell you what the quote relative humidity is. And I can tell you at design temperatures in Colorado and design days, the relative humidity is 11%. So that's a pretty tip here. Or, well, at least in Colorado. Here in Minnesota, it's a little wetter, much more humid, much more. All right, so we've got this coincident wet bulb thing. So what the heck is this all about? Well, what that is it's the wet bulb expected to be coexist, as it says, with the 1% dry bulb temperature, which is in cooling 90 degrees. So if it were 90 degrees outside, and I was going to sling my psychrometer, my wet bulb would say 59 degrees. That's what that means. Make sense? Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know why this has got that automatic thing in there. Sorry about that. Not doing that on purpose. So when we're doing design conditions here, we're going to be doing 70 degrees winter and 75 at 50% relative humidity. And that is considered comfort, whether you like it or not. That's what we consider comfort. Yeah, we're not going to have the comfort conversation. Somebody's got to set it, and ACCA and ASHRAE and everybody else has set it. For somebody that's sitting around a house in fairly low activity, oh, there it is. There's my little chart. Guess I just got the whole thing messed up here. And I don't know why it's doing that. I'm really sorry. All right, so why am I saying 30% at winter? We do not want to over humidify during the winter. At least we don't want to design for more than that. Now, I can't help what people may or may not do in their own home, okay? But I'm not going to design for it, okay? So if they want to humidify, they want to put in a humidifier, that's perfectly fine. But I'm not going to let them design for more than 30%. When we starting getting past that, we have a real possibility of condensation happening in places we don't want to happen. You know, if you start to see condensation on the inside of your windows, you don't want to happen inside your walls or places you can't see. That would be bad, okay? There's nothing in the code that says this. This is all based on ASHRAE and ACCA design parameters. So whenever I get something, I tell them 30%. It's going to be 30 and 50, okay? Here's that chart I was telling you about. And so I had the slide, I knew it was there. So if it was 90 degrees out, I was slinging that bad boy, it would tell me it was 59 degrees. And then this is that little depression chart I was telling you. So here's 90 degrees and a 31 degree depression, so it'd be 11% humidity. I don't have a picture, but you could also take this to the psychrometric chart. Mechanical engineers will use that quite a bit. It'll tell you enthalpy, there are all kinds of stuff about the air. Not that we're going to get into that today, but that just tried to tell you what the difference between this whole wet bulb and dry bulb thing is, because that becomes important when we're going to do sizing. You need to know what the whole wet bulb thing is all about when we get to Manual S. Okay, so enough about design dry bulbs and what they are. Oh, did we talk about they're never the extremes? So here's this table 1A to Manual J. So you suppose it ever gets colder than -3 here in Denver, or any hotter than 90? You bet it does. Absolutely it does. I mean, it gets way less than -3. The key is that's what this whole 99 and 1% piece is. So 99% of the time, it's warmer than -3. And only 1% of the time is it hotter than 90. That's what that means. So you're going to say, okay, well, I don't know if it's 105 degrees in Denver, which it's gotten to, and will my house still cool? And the answer is absolutely. Absolutely. Air conditioner will just run all day long. It's okay. It's the most energy efficient thing you could do. Just run all day. Run 4 or 5 hours at a time. Absolutely. And even if it's 20 below outside, your pipes aren't going to freeze and you're not going to freeze to death inside your house. Freeze just runs.
You hear that argument all the time down here in Texas, Gil, and I'm so sick of hearing it. Well, it gets hotter than 97 here. Yeah, it'll be over 100 for 60 days in a row, but excuse me. And yes, you would need to design for a higher temperature if you were cooling a circus tent, but you're cooling a house. And what does a house have? It has a building thermal envelope that slows that transmission, that heat, you know, and it's a bad argument that folks are still wanting to use to get to that 500 square foot per ton rule of thumb that we're
it just doesn't
trying to get away from.
Yeah, if you get a design and it's anywhere at 400 or 500 square feet per ton, it's wrong. I mean, I hate to talk about rule of thumbs, but generally speaking, you're looking at 1,000 or 1,200 square feet a ton if you have a house that's built correctly, and that's a good point. When I first started down this path, I started with the building's thermal envelope. I actually started with the building shell. Okay, nobody had ever heard of flashing or water-resistant barriers and that kind of stuff there when I started. And it was just like, dude, really? Nobody's doing it? This is where we're starting. Okay. Then we started on insulation, installation, and air barriers and all that kind of stuff to make sure we had a decent thermal envelope. And that's when, not until after, that I started pushing HVAC design, because of course you could design the world's best HVAC system and have the world's suckiest building thermal envelope, and it's never going to work. It takes both. It really does. So those of you that aren't into doing the thermal envelope stuff, you don't even want to start down this path, not even close, because it'll be doomed to failure. Yeah. So get the thermal envelope, get your shell building good, and then you can start down this path. It's a cool path. Okay. So enough about that. So we've got -3 and 90 is what table 1A says. That's when this one particular says we're in good shape. Oops. And here it is in Elite. And so far, I've only been looking at one page on both of these softwares. You might get 75 pages, but there's a page that's going to have all of this stuff on there. And as this stuff isn't right, it's not going to work. Right? All the rest of it's just gobbledygook. Okay. Here, this is one place in the code that actually sets what the interior designs are. Now, ACCA recommends that 70 and 75 that's in there, but this is what the code says. So you're doing no more than 72 for heating, and no less than 75 for cooling, okay? And that's another argument I'm sure Jason's heard a million times. Well, they don't like 75, they're comfortable at 70. We're gonna design for 70 inside. Yeah, no. Will it cool to 70? Absolutely, positively, okay? We're not designing refrigerators or freezers here, okay? We're designing a home. So as long as you keep to the 72 or the 70 and the 75, believe me, this place will perform as long as the thermal envelope has been done correctly. Believe me, I can say that very confidently, having now had houses for well over 2 decades designed to this very specifically. We don't have any complaints. We're not getting it. In fact, that once HVAC guys get a hold of this stuff, and bless their hearts, okay, you've got guys that have been doing this their entire life, okay? Their dad had the business, maybe their grandpa had the business, and now they're doing it. There's the 3rd generation doing HVAC installation, okay? And they've never heard of this thing in their entire life, okay? And then who comes along? This guy, Gil, building official idiot, who hasn't installed a furnace his entire life, and I'm trying to tell him what to do, okay? I'm saying, well, I don't think it works. Well, I've been doing it all my life. And these guys aren't idiots. They're proud of what they're doing, okay? That's why you've got to let them decide for themselves. When I first started doing this, I didn't make them do a manual S. I didn't make them do a manual D. No. You know why? Because they asked me not to, because they already knew what they were doing, right? So I'd get a manual J that was at least 1 sheet, start easy, that say, here's what you're doing and what the size needs. And of course they weren't correct, but you had to let them learn for themselves. So what I required in the beginning was that not only get a manual J, but you had to test your systems. And you needed room-to-room flows at rough, and I wanted to see a duct leakage test at rough end, okay? So I mandated that and said, you know what? I'm not going to make you hire a third party. I want you to buy your own equipment and test it yourself. I'll believe you. If you tell me it works, I'm easy. What was the very first thing those guys did, especially the ones that have been doing this for several generations? They bought this equipment because why? Because their system worked. They already knew it worked because they've been doing it all their life. So what do you suppose they did with their brand new equipment? What was the very first thing they did? They went out and tested. They had a house they had just completed. Brand new house, sheetrock, ready for CO. They'd go out and test their house. And you want to know what they found? They found that what they've been doing all their lives wasn't working. Many times, 50 and 60% duct leakage, not unusual. Never. Static pressures, they were wondering why the air was even moving through their system, okay? And my hat's off to God bless these guys. Can you imagine doing something your entire life and then having the realization that what you've been doing for generations wasn't working, didn't work at all? Yeah, so my hat's off to these guys. That's a big step. Imagine yourself with whatever it is you do going through that. I'm telling you, that's not easy. And like I said, some they'll never go back. They'll never do it the other way, ever, okay? And then there are those that just never came back. They didn't do it anymore, so that's fine. Anyway, so here we are checking out our indoor temperatures. We're at 70 and 75, good to go. Here, again, 70 and 75. Good to go. Oh, here. This is a really good book. Manual RS. This thing hasn't changed in forever because, well, it's just how things work. Okay. A really good, easy read. Could have, plain language, not a lot of technical stuff. I mean, there's technical stuff in there, but it's good plain language stuff. Okay. Go to the ACCA website. And buy yourself RS. It's like 20, 25 bucks. It's not that expensive. And it's just a really good basic, this is how a forced air furnace works. This is how an air conditioner works. This is what comfort is, an entire chapter on comfort. And how about this? Right in the very beginning is, what is the expectation for a single zone constant volume system? So what I just described is probably what is installed in most homes today. So I've got, you guys don't have basements, but you probably got 2-story houses, huh? And do they have 2 systems? Do they have a furnace in the first floor and a furnace in the attic? Second floor? Or do they have a furnace, one furnace, and it's doing the entire building? Well, I can tell you what we have in Colorado. We got basements in every single house, and they're all, you know, a lot of them aren't ranches, you know, single-story houses. A lot of them are 2 stories, but they'll have one furnace in the house, in the basement, and it does the basement, the first floor, and the second floor. It does the whole house. And so when the furnace is on, everything's on, and when the furnace is off, everything's off. So that's a single zone, constant volume system. What is the expectation? Okay. So we talked about that example where, oh my gosh, it gets hotter than 90 degrees in Denver. Yes, it does. And I had one contractor who was good. This guy is still good. I still talk with him today. We've got a great relationship. He was incensed that I made him test his systems. And he was also really not happy with me because he was always oversizing his systems by half a ton. And I said, dude, we can't be doing that. You got to size it right. And he says, Gil, let's make a challenge. Let's do a test. I said, what do you have in mind? He goes, well, I says, I will size this model home. So it was a big production home builder. I'm going to have a model home and I'll size it exactly the way Manual J says, and then we're going to do a test. I have a temperature system where we can put temperature probes throughout the house in the different rooms, and it all goes back to a centralized computer and then records the interior temperatures in the home. And we can put a temperature probe on the outside, like up underneath the front porch, and get an outside air reading. And I said, you're on. He says, then we'll decide what we're going to do. And I said, okay, sounds good. We did it for 2 weeks. In that 2 weeks, you want to know what the average high temperature was in Denver? 105 degrees. It was the perfect test. I'm telling you, I loved it. I thought, I've got it. Of course, the HVAC designer said, we're going to nail it. Okay? So we put temperature probes. I saw him charge the system exactly right. Probes on the first and second floor. We didn't bother with the basement. And one on the outside. And sure enough, it would show 103 and 105 degrees during the day. And this is a single zone constant volume system, all right? So 105 degrees outside, perfect. What was the temperature on the first floor? Remember, that's where the thermostat is at. The temperature on the first floor was 75 degrees. Wow, that's quite the delta T, huh? What was the temperature on the second floor? Now just imagine, I'm sitting in the conference room and I've got the HVAC designer sharing his results, and I've got all the guys, the builder, sitting around the table, the VPs and the president, you know, the whole ball of wax, right? And he goes, well, it was 85 degrees on the second floor. And I said, well, it looks like you pass. They all looked at me like I was some kind of idiot. They said, Gil, have you been on the second floor of that house? And I said, yeah, man, that's hard than heck. I would never want to live there. They all looked at me like I was some kind of dumb. I said, well, have you read the manual RS? That house is performing exactly the way you designed it. There is no expectation for less than an 8 to 10 degree. You're looking at 7 or 8 degrees on a design day. Well, that would have been at 90 degrees. Well, we were 15 degrees hotter than that. Yeah, 10 degree delta T between floors, not a problem. And that book right there will tell you that, right? And that HVAC guy looked at me and said, well, I've been telling this builder for years they need to have a zoning option because I can't solve that with a single zone constant volume system. And I said, well, there you have it. And there's the answer. So anyway, That's the story that goes, well, yeah, it gets hotter than 97. Well, yeah, who cares? You want it different? Put in a zone system. So here we're looking at the relative humidity. We talked about that a little bit, that 30 and that 50% there, which is good. Here, good again on leak. Nice double check, piece of cake. So moisture difference. Now, if you're in a drier climate, this is the one that we're looking at here. This moisture difference in grains per pound, this number right here. This is the one that for some reason, those that want a bigger air conditioner will start to monkey with, okay? You guys that are in humid areas, that's gonna be a positive number, and it should be, or a lot less negative. But any place we've got a nice dry climate, certainly Colorado is one of those, it's gonna be way negative, okay? When they start to monkey with that, that artificially increases the latent load of the moisture content for the air conditioning system. So that's why it's important, I think, for us to know. I mean, it's just going to be way negative, depending on the weather data that's in the software in Colorado and Denver generally, or gosh, anywhere up and down the Front Range of the mountains. It's going to be minus 25 to 40, depending on the weather data that you've got. But the key is it just needs to be negative. And clue yourself in for wherever it is that you're at and what that moisture difference should be, that grains per pound. And the same thing, if they're, not want, or maybe increasing it, making it a higher number. So if it's supposed to be 20 and they're making it 40 or 50, that's really going to jack up the latent load artificially. So it's good to know what it is for your particular area of the country. Here again, another piece here on the elite, telling us the same information. So now that we've kind of gotten the design parameters, okay, so we've, altitude, design temperatures inside and out, grains difference, those types of things. Now we need to try to look at, have we actually designed the way the house was actually built? And this is what we call the construction descriptions, or how the R values and U values for the windows. So here's just a piece out of RightSoft. I like it because it actually gives you this wonderful description. It actually comes in, tells you what it is. I mean, does anybody know what a 12E-0SW is? Unless you got the Manual J book, you'd never know. But this is a frame wall, wood exterior, half-inch wood sheathing. It's got R19 cavity insulation, half-inch gyp on the inside, and it's a 2x6 wall. Okay. Here, it's just giving us the areas based on the direction and the areas, the all exterior walls, and what the insulation value is in the cavity, and giving it the U value. U value of the assembly here. We've got below grade walls, 2x4, so it looks like they're doing a finished basement in this one. R13 cavity piece, again, giving your square footage. And here we can check out. They should be relatively close. I don't get bent out of shape on the whole square footage thing. It should be close. Close, a couple of 100 feet. What I look for is, did they miss the second floor? And I've seen that before. If you don't design these things right in the software, it's like it just disappears. It's like they're not connected. And I've had that before. It's like, well, it's not anywhere near 1107. It should be like 2107. What happened? So I don't get too bent out of shape without a few hundred square feet here and there. Ceilings, again, this one happens to be R38 gyp board. We got shingles. This one, that's actually the garage, which we include in there because we get a partition wall in there. Partition wall, now that I've said it, I don't think I've got a slide. Partition wall would be a wall that's separating unconditioned space from conditioned space. So I don't know if you guys got attached garages, that would be the wall between the house and the garage. Or if you've got houses where you've got dormers maybe on the second floor, and that exterior wall is common with the attic. And right, that might be such a case. Do you suppose the weather in the attic's a little bit different than outside during the summer? Yeah, it might be 100 degrees outside, but it's probably 160 inside that attic, right? Yeah, so you can actually take that into account within the software. You can get pretty down and dirty with it. Here, Elite, I don't think does a great job of it. A lot of times when they're programming their own walls in there, they don't give you a good description. In RightSoft, you actually can click on buttons and build a wall, and it shows you a little picture of how you're building the wall, and then it provides that wonderful description. If they're not giving you a good description, you should ask for it. Okay. I think they go on. It does. Yeah, it kind of gets as to what the walls are in a different, more of a detailed room loads in Elite. I just wish it was a little bit nicer on one sheet, makes it a little bit simpler. But if you look hard enough, you can find the values. So I just did a quick little piece to show you the difference. I mean, this isn't a big house. This is actually a 3,800 square foot. So that's a ranch, a walkout, or a full basement, fully finished basement, ranch style house, like 3,600 square feet. And you can see what the difference in loads are between an R19 and R21 wall. A couple of hundred BTU here and there. Okay. Generally speaking, not a lot. You don't have to lose a lot of sleep over it. I prefer, one that's more accurate. If this was maybe the only thing that was wrong, I don't know that I would have pushed it. But I would certainly say, hey, next one, can we get, what they're actually putting in there? I know that it's not going to change equipment. It might change, the room-to-room flows, CFM-wise, 1 or 2 CFM. Certainly isn't going to make any difference on the duct sizing. But it's nice to have something that's accurate. But again, you can see that an R2 difference isn't the end of the planet. Yeah, more of this in construction type descriptions. We got glazing, probably the single biggest deal here. All of your solar gains are through the stinking windows, yes? Yeah. So we need to take credit. We need to take credit for the solar heat gain coefficient that's there, the right U factor, and take credit for windows. We should be seeing stuff like this. Yeah. Yeah, blinds at 45 degrees, medium color, 50% insect screen. And do they have an overhang? Is there a soffit? Is it shaded? Okay. Are there going to be windows that have no blinds or shades? I would, yes. Is every single window in the entire house going to be no shades, no drapes, no blinds, no nothing? Maybe on some rare occasion. But I would have to bet that they're mostly there, okay? So we should see some of this. I don't get bent out of shape. I generally look to see that we've included this. 9 times out of 10, I don't see any of it. It'll just say final U value and solar heat gain coefficient, and then none of the rest of this stuff. That's it. So it's the highest air conditioning it'll ever be, okay? That's not real life. People are going to have blinds and shades. So I think that should be there. Again, Elite doesn't do a great job of telling you what's going on, and you need to ask. Unless they type it in. They've got the solar heat gain coefficient and the U value here, but it doesn't tell you if the shades or windows were included. For those of you that know Elite better than I do, maybe there's a way that they can put it in there. Do not know the answer to that question. Yeah, attic insulation, pretty clear. Got to have the right attic insulation, right ceiling material. What's happening here? The square footage is easy to do it. This here's the garage, but you can see there's no load. I had to include it in the calculation because, out of the calculation, we're just going to count the square footage because I created a partition wall between the two. That's all. Let's see what oh yeah, here's the glazing. Here in the Elite. Then we get into these you're going to get in a lot of pages here, page after page after page after page in Elite or RightSoft, if they happen to give it to you. I like to see it, at least this first one. So what this does, there's some clues here. So here we're going to see the entire house here. And what we're going to do is we're going to scan in on this very bottom piece here on the next slide. So here's the entire house, okay? And it's giving all our construction descriptions, if you can remember, right? But we don't care about that. We want to look at the bottom. So hopefully I got the bottom of that page. Yes, here's the bottom of the page. So we're going to learn about what this AED excursion thing is in a moment, okay? So here's just the whole building. So this is the entire building here we're looking at. The infiltration that we've got, and here's the one that we want to look at here. How many people do they have in the house? I can tell you how many people there should be in this house, one for every bedroom plus one. That is the number of people in the house. I don't want to come down here and see 55 people in a 3,600 square foot house, okay? If they want to design for a party, tell them, oh, it looks like you've designed for the party. Now what are you going to do for the rest of the time? Okay, that's not what we do here. Okay, they want to design for a party, do something different, but it isn't going to be this. The other one is this one here, this appliance other piece. Okay, that's pretty typical, 2,400 BTU. So this is for things like the refrigerator and the stove, microwave, maybe electronic equipment, things of that nature. You need to include those loads. If they've got, the TV room, right, the entertainment center, that they're going to have some real stuff in, they should add that load to that room. Within the software, you can actually go in each and every single room and add an appliance or what's going on in that room. And if that's happening, that's fine. But if it's not, just don't artificially include it in here to do that. I come in here, I came in at one point, I had one design that came in at 23,000. 23,000. Not 2,400, but 23,000. This is like, dude, where did you come up with that? Where did that come from? Let me know how you came up with it, because that seems really unrealistic, and it was. They were just monkeying with it. So that's it about that. So AED excursion is the solar gains based on, well, let's take a look. I think that's the next piece. Let's see. Oh yeah, so here it is for elite people, equipment, lighting. And here's another one that I haven't talked about, duct work, and I don't know why I didn't bring that up on others. If the ductwork is located outside the building thermal envelope, we should see losses and gains, okay? And here we do. Here we got a loss right there, okay? 2,400 BTU. We just need to verify in the duct plan and or the plans for the home that that's the case. Is the ductwork within the attic space, as an example, and it's a vented attic assembly? If that's the case, then absolutely. They should be adding for ductwork losses and gains. Not a very good design. In fact, it's not best practice by any means, but it's not against the code. Okay? You could easily, and this is just a minor, 2,400 is nothing. If you have ductwork in the attic, especially in your climate, I suspect that it's adding easy a ton of air conditioning, easy without even looking at it, which is just a waste. I mean, it's just a waste. I mean, sure, code allows it, but the code allows you to do a lot of stuff that's not very bright. Anyway, gotta keep moving here. So here's this so AED is adequate exposure diversity, and what this is something that the software does. We as code officials don't care about this number. Okay, this is something for the designer, and so the designer now can look at this and say, okay, we have a little blue line. Oopsie, we got the little blue line here. It looks blue to me. So this is my solar gains throughout the day. Okay, so it starts at 8 o'clock in the morning. So, mid-afternoon, it's getting pretty warm. Okay? And so what this is doing now is it says an average. So it's now doing automatic things. So this is my average or my load. This is the average load. And this is a line that's 30% above the average. Anything above my 30% is called the excursion. And what this does is tells designers, you know, there might be a room or two or three that might get really warm in the afternoon or whenever the sun's shining in, okay? You might consider doing a zoned system or something different. And so where that shows up is here. This is that excursion. So for in this particular example, it's only 1,800 BTUs for the entire house, okay? Then over here, it'll start to give you the different rooms, what's happening in that room. And so believe me, a 500 BTU is nothing and is not really going to affect the load. The design, the air conditioner will be designed to make sure that it takes this 1,800 BTU into account. It will size it for it. And it'll let you know what's happening in each of the rooms. But it's not going to say, oh, you need to do a zone system over here. No, it's just going to say, I'm just kind of telling you what's going on. You might want to do something about it. Now, I just look at that just for fun. If they haven't picked up on it, I have had houses that have had a sunroom option on it. It's got a regular roof on it, but it's just not, it's surrounded, it's 3 sides of glass or 2 sides of glass. There are times, depending on which direction, that was adding over a ton of air conditioning just for the excursion. And I'd simply say, you might want to think about putting some shades or something on that bad boy and telling the homeowners that you can't sit in there, or you're going to have to zone the system to take care of it. Okay? But again, not something as code officials or the code talks about, just something for the guys doing the design. I think I've been talking really fast. All right, so anytime we got questions is good. So this is my email. Do not hesitate to send me an email with questions. Give me a day or so to respond, but love to hear what's going on. Love to try to answer your questions because it makes me learn too. If you're just starting down this path, more than happy to look at Manual J's, S&Ds, looks at the reviews, and it takes me about 40 or 50 seconds to tell you if it's going to be good or bad. Other than that, I don't know. We got any questions, Jason? I kind of blew through that.
Hey, I just would say to folks, if you're just starting down this path, change directions. Get on. It's not. I mean, you're just starting. Get on a different path. No. Robert wants to know, is the short form equivalent to the full Manual J?
So are you talking?
There's that abridged edition.
Oh, the abridged edition? No. So the abridged edition, that is the Manual J AE, okay? You can use that, but there are 24 different requirements that must be met before you're allowed to use it. Now, that is what we used to call version 7, okay? You can get that if you can actually download version 7. It's a great big fancy schmancy Excel spreadsheet. And you can download that from the ACCA website for free. The problem is that it doesn't generally fit the houses that we build today, okay? One of the requirements is that it has adequate exposure diversity, okay? Well, I'd have to say that 90% of the houses that you're designing or that are built do not have adequate exposure diversity. There is some sort of an excursion. That's one of the requirements. One of the other requirements is that it be a single zone constant volume system. Can't be zoned, okay? So does it work? Yes, but it is very limited. I have not seen anybody use version 7 in the longest time. 8 is so much easier.
I remember Wes Davis with ACCA joined me for a webinar, and we went through that residential system design review form. One of the check boxes is, you know, if you were using that, and yeah, by the time you get through all the check boxes that you have to check before you can use that, you basically don't build houses that way. So I would 100%.
That's correct. Yep.
Well, I've been beating them up. I've been beating these folks to death with Manual J just because I'm trying. The reality of it is here in Texas, Gil, unfortunately, is 49 out of 50 HVAC contractors are still using rules of thumb. Don't touch JS&D whatsoever.
Yeah.
And, you know, but I live in reality, and the reality of it is I'm only slowly but surely talking jurisdictions into requiring these and reviewing them. And for you code officials thinking about starting to, you know, up the floor of the HVAC industry here in Texas, I think I've been working with the city of Harker Heights and the building official there, Michael Beard. I talked him into or helped kind of consult him through a thought process on how he's going to get his contractors doing it. And Gil, you had kind of mentioned it in your presentation, and you don't have to hit them over the head with all of it in the beginning. You know, maybe for the first 60 days, start requiring the Manual J permit. And then maybe after those 60 days, maybe make them show you the equipment selection. And then maybe after 60 days of doing that, then maybe you get a duct system. You know, you get your Manual D and your duct distribution and system sketch. I mean, you know, I live in reality, and just that is, yeah, the chief compliance officer with the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation just chimed in. And he's the guy for enforcing that they do it correctly. And he says, yeah, ditto. Most of them use a rule of thumb. And you know, with Texas, with the 2015 Energy Code is the crummiest house you can build in the state of Texas. If you do that correctly and do a good job, that 500 square foot per ton rule of thumb that frankly probably worked fine 30 years ago when we had crummy glass and all the other things that leaky homes and 20%. But I'm telling you, today it is such a disservice for the constituents in your municipality if you are allowing the home builders, and it's a disservice across the board. The HVAC contractor is buying and installing a bigger system than he needs to. The home builder is spending more money on the HVAC system than he needs to. It's an energy hog because it's short cycling. It's not removing humidity. We're causing problems with the power grid. There's just myriad of problems that come along with it. And so we're slowly but surely turning the table here in Texas, Gil, but it's just you know how it is. If everybody's been doing something the same way for years and years and years, that's the hardest thing to affect change. Do you have any tips or tricks for code officials looking to institute this and start really requiring this and thinking about it?
Yeah, so I'll tell you what I did. It's definitely a stepped type process, okay? And so, as I was saying, the first thing I started doing was requiring, you know, flashing details and water resistant barriers, and, you know, are we caulking things, and, you know, all of that stuff. Because I was on a path. You know, I had just worked for a production builder where this is stuff we were doing like every day, right? This is like, we were the only ones doing it. Nobody else was. So first thing you got to do is get a decent building shell and get the whole air barrier business under control. Okay, I can guarantee you that what ends up happening when you start forcing this manual, you know, HVAC design is that the contractors have come up with a very good question. They said, well, how do we know the builders are doing what they're supposed to do? Right? How do we know? And I thought, you know what? You've got an excellent question. So let's do this. Well, I bought everybody a blower door. And back then, you know, blower doors were like, what the hell is that? Right? Well, I bought them blower doors, 2 for every single builder that was there, and made it a training opportunity and said, this is what your house is doing. Okay? And of course, all the HVAC contractors were blown away because when we did those tests, every single house we did would have been an Energy Star house had they been part of the program. The builders were like, we had no idea. We had no idea we were doing that well. Well, I already knew it because I've been doing it, okay? And so the key here is that you do have to bite the bullet. You do have to say, this is what we're doing, okay? And you give everybody warning. So I gave everybody a year. I got all the VPs of construction from all the production builders that we had, and I got them all in the big conference room. And I said, we're going to start down. We got the next step. And I knew Gil, every time we did a code change, we went to the next step. So you guys got a year to comply with JS&D. And here's how we're going to do it. It says we're going to do a year. The next year, every single house you do can fail. But a year from now, if you don't have it down pat, you don't get permits. It was simple, okay? And for all the grief that I put folks through, not one time did the HVA come to me and say, what the hell are you doing to my builders? Because all I was doing was finding compliance with the code that had been there forever. This is not something Gil has dreamed up.
Yeah, and that's a super good approach. Give them time, make it clear what the requirements are, give them plenty of time to get there. When I was a building official, I tried to give my builders one thing a month. It's like, okay, I'm gonna, go to one of those code classes and learn like 40 things, and I've got my hands over my ears going, just so I don't hear any more things that I've got to bring back to my builders. But if you come back to your builders with 42 new requirements in one day, they're going to hate you. So.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. When we started that whole thermal envelope thing, it was not only, when I first started in Parker, they had adopted the 2000 energy code, okay? And I started there in 2003, okay? And I've been doing this up. Okay, and I come in, I said, Randy, a guy I'd worked with for years. Randy, you adopted the energy code. They go, well, yeah. I said, the 2000, I said, what are you guys doing? He looked at me and says, what do you mean, what are we doing? I said, well, what are you doing to find compliance? I said, Randy, just go give me the book and we'll go through the book. So he brings me back the book, and the 2000 IECC is still in the cellophane. They had never opened the book, okay? So that's where my guys started. These guys aren't idiots. Right? They did a great job, but they had never thought about how insulation is supposed to be in. What's a thermal envelope? What's a water resistant barrier? What's flashing, right? None of that stuff they'd ever been doing. So not only did we have to train my guys, we had to train the builders. And so I'm telling you, manufacturers will bend over backwards to come and show you how things are supposed to be installed correctly, and it doesn't cost you a dime. So once a month or once a week, when we first started, it was pretty often, I'd fill up the conference room with my guys and the builders, and we'd all learn at the same time. And that's where we'd set expectations. We'd say, okay, guys, you've got 2 weeks to figure this out, or you've got a month to figure this out. And believe me, what we will write on our field inspection report is in 3 weeks, this will not pass. In 2 weeks, this will not pass. Next week, this won't pass. Next week comes, guess what? This doesn't pass, start over again, okay? So it's exceptionally important, just like Jason said, to help train, get everybody on the same speed, and set the expectations, draw a line, and keep it. And believe me, when I came up and started doing this, 2 years later, when I said we're doing Manual J, they knew I meant business. I wasn't gonna let it slide. It was going to happen. You know how many times I'd show up on the job site and I was unwrapping. I was helping them unpack their duct tightness tester for the very first time, okay, and show them how to use it. We had great fun. It was great. The guys that wanted to learn, it was awesome. Talk about having to redesign everything. Building cavities didn't work, and that was what everybody was using. Ducted returns, what are you, nuts? Well, I said, I don't know how you're going to pass duct tightness test using cavities because it doesn't work. Never has. Yeah, anyway, I'm starting to ramble.
Well, good for you. I appreciate it. We're a few minutes over. We'll go ahead and cut it short. I could sit here and chat building science with you all afternoon, but we'll save it for next week. Same time, same place. Thanks so much, Gil. Fantastic job. I knew it would be. And we will catch you next week.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys. Talk to you.
Thanks.